Okay, my next question, Don, about how is New Orleans still staying such a cultural and musical epicenter of this country?
Well, I think it's because New Orleans, because of its rich European and African heritage, is unique in the United States. I mean, it's always amazing to me when people come to New Orleans for the first time, others from around this country, they're in shock that a city like New Orleans can really exist in America. And what's wonderful is that people come here. I mean, it was amazing after Katrina. Thousands and thousands of young people, middle-aged people coming in with school groups from universities, from church groups, from neighborhood organizations, responded to the disaster of New Orleans by coming in and helping. People were here gutting houses, volunteering, helping feed people. And it really made you feel good about people, that they could come and help other people. But so many people were exposed to New Orleans for the first time that they stayed. And it was, so unique to them. And for so many years, New Orleans has been that kind of place that has attracted the creative people. When you look at our traditions of writers such as Tennessee Williams and William Faulkner coming to New Orleans because it was a place they felt comfortable living in, the old world French Quarter and enjoying fine cuisine and being relatively inexpensive. And in music, so many people are aware of the traditions of New Orleans music and love it, that you're constantly seeing people come and move to New Orleans. Right now, particularly again after Katrina, so many young people from around the country and around the world have moved here. They're sort of like the new bohemians that have come to New Orleans. They have a great love of the old traditional jazz, but they're bringing a lot of new elements to it. I mean, there's the gypsy jazz element that comes in. I mean, you'll see violins and accordions and these young people who are just passionate about being in New Orleans, loving the music, and taking the music to a different level and everything. So it's really refreshing to know that our music isn't just an old, dead museum type music, that it's evolving. It has the real nucleus of the original music, but it's being explored in very new, rich, dynamic ways. So we're very fortunate to have this kind of rich culture that's unique, that is very attractive to creative people. And I know with Jazz Fest, we're always amazed that people come to Jazz Fest, fall in love with the music and all the different parades and cultural traditions, the food, and they don't want to leave. So we've been responsible for, getting people to actually move to New Orleans. And one of the other things that, people think of New Orleans in terms of its music, its rich food traditions, and also its amazing architecture. We were a major American city, as I mentioned earlier, the third largest city in the United States, very rich city. And at that time built amazing Victorian homes and Creole cottages and had this huge growth of beautiful architecture. But after the Civil War, with the destruction that happened during the Civil War to this region, and also the change from water transportation, which we depended on because of the port, going to rail transportation, the economy of New Orleans started to slide. But people were too poor to tear down the beautiful old homes. So unlike a lot of American cities that were richer, which just demolished blocks and blocks of beautiful homes and buildings, New Orleans didn't have the money to do that and rebuild. So we were left with this incredible inventory of fantastic architecture. So creative types enjoy living in beautiful, Victorian homes with high ceilings and wood floors and everything. So it all kind of ties in. But also one of the unique traditions of New Orleans and our culture is that this was, we look back at slavery and the times after slavery, that there was a whole concept of free men of color. And often you would have intermarriage between the Europeans and the Africans, or relationships that produce what we call our Creoles of color. And so you had a very educated community of Creoles of color, many who then sent their children off to Europe You would have the rich white father who then had the African mistress, and these children who were then, you know, kept in special parts of the town in homes and sent to Europe for education. But you developed a whole educated class of African Americans that became community leaders, doctors, lawyers, and that's also something very unique to New Orleans. And our African culture has had a tremendous impact on New Orleans, not only in jazz, but we have one of the most unique things with our Mardi Gras Indians. And these are men, African American men, generally, you know, workers who during Mardi Gras and other times of year create these incredible costumes with plumage and feathers, color feathers, and then the men actually do beading and do different types of designs, symbolic designs, and they dress up. It's sort of like the most elaborate American Indian costume you could conceive of. And there's a lot of different stories of how this got started. No one ever really knows exactly how it happened, but between the cultural traditions of Africa with plumage and procession and dancing, and then also in the United States with the Native Americans, somehow those forces joined together to create this unique culture. Also, during slavery time in America, you had the Native Americans and the slaves who often partnered. Occasionally when a slave would escape, they would be taken by a Native American tribe. So there was a lot of interaction and relationships between the Native Americans and the slaves, and a lot of empathy. So when the African Americans decided to dress up during Mardi Gras and celebrate, they developed this incredibly beautiful, unique tradition. So the Mardi Gras Indian tradition is one of the most unique things about New Orleans and one of the most visual and exciting. The other concept that's pretty unique here is what we call our social aid and pleasure clubs. Again, this is an African American tradition. And groups of men and women would gather to form a club, and they would work together to help pay for insurance and funeral costs and other costs that poorer people could not afford to deal with. But as a club, they would raise money, so if one of their members passed away, the club would pay for their funeral. And every year, each one of these clubs, and this is a long-standing tradition, comes out on a Sunday with their unique dress and one of our brass bands. And so through the streets of New Orleans, pretty much every Sunday, in certain times of the year, you'll have a procession going through the neighborhoods of beautifully dressed African American men and women, followed by a brass band, and then the neighborhood and other friends and visitors will parade behind them. That's what's called the second line, and that's another New Orleans tradition. It's the people behind the band that becomes the second line in the parade. And in New Orleans, it's amazing. We love to celebrate. We love to celebrate life. We love to make it where it's accessible to everybody, whether it's our Mardi Gras, which happens once a year, and Mardi Gras Indian traditions, social aid and pleasure clubs, and our numerous music festivals. So if you come to New Orleans, every day is a celebration.